Hello and welcome to Season 7 of Buffy and the Art of Story. If you love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you love creating stories or just taking them apart to see how they work, you're in the right place. I am Lisa M. Lilly, author and story expert. Thank you for hanging in there while I took a short break from podcasting. Today we're crossing over to Angel for another episode involving faith. Angel Season 4, Episode 14, Release, where Angel keeps searching for the beast's master. Faith and Angelus battle, and Cordelia implores Connor to keep their baby a secret. Along with a recap of Release, today I'll talk about how writers draw on backstory from both Buffy and Angel to feed the conflicts here, what true conflict is and why it matters so much to story, the many storylines in this episode that leave a question about whether there is a main plot, and whether Release ends with a cliffhanger or a game changer, and does it matter? As always, there'll be no spoilers except in the foreshadowing section at the end. Okay, let's dive into the Hellmouth. Release was directed by James A. Contner and written by Stephen S. DeKnight, Elizabeth Craft, and Sarah Fain. The original air date was March 12, 2003. Release begins with an opening conflict, as it should. Wesley and a battered and bleeding Faith enter his apartment. This is after the fight that took place in the last episode with Angelus and the Beast, where Angel or Angelus killed the Beast and badly beat up Faith. The conflict here is the fallout from that fight, but it is mainly between Wesley and Faith. It's minor, but it sets the stage for the episode. He gives her an ice pack, wants to know if she's okay. She insists that she is fine. Wesley points out that she was nearly killed, but Faith just tells him she could use a shower. She moves slowly as she takes off her boots in the bathroom, then looks at herself in the mirror. Her face is covered with blood. As she undresses, we see how bruised her shoulders and arms and legs are. Under the shower, more blood drips down. It looks at first like the water running over her face is helping her relax, but then she punches the tile wall and shouts. She breaks through the tiles and the drywall. Then she truly looks a bit calmer as the shower sprays in her face. The scene cuts to a demon bar with loud music. Angelus drinks and laughs with a bunch of demons. A female demon flirts with him. Angelus brags about how he beat up the Slayer and got the Slayer to tenderize the Beast, then killed the Beast. And a demon sitting over at the bar says, "Yeah, soul boy, nice job bringing the sun back." This is a great way to remind the audience of that fight and what happened, and that the Beast being in the world meant the sun was blacked out, a sort of demon vampire free-for-all that Angelus now ended. Angelus, not too pleased, confronts the demon, grabs him by the throat, but a deep voice sounds in Angelus's head, telling him it's time they talked. And we go to credits at 4 minutes, 24 seconds, so right about 10% through the episode. By this time in a story, we usually see the inciting incident, or what I think of as the story spark, that gets the main plot rolling. Here, it's not clear what that is, partly because, as we'll see, it's not that clear which is the main plot. The Beastmaster Angelus subplot started with a voice in Angelus's head, so that got rolling. The main plot probably is Faith and Wesley hunting Angelus. Has that started yet? You might see it as Faith needing to process what happened in that last fight in order to move forward, and she did that by punching the wall. But To me, that feels more like falling action left over from last time, or that bit of opening conflict we need to draw readers in, but not necessarily to start that main plot. The demon is confused when Angelus starts ignoring him and talks back to the voice that no one else can hear, and soon the whole bar, everyone in it, is staring at Angelus. The voice is angry that Angelus killed the beast, its favorite pet, but does like initiative and has had an eye on Angelus. Angelus goes into the back area of the bar. He tells the people there who look drugged and out of it to get out. Angelus tells the voice he wants a face-to-face. The camera cuts to a quick shot of Cordelia with her eyes all cloudy. She is speaking to Angelus. It doesn't sound like her, though. It's this very deep, kind of gravelly voice. And this makes it clear, if we weren't sure or didn't remember, that Cordelia is the beast's master. Angelus taunts the voice about how it did all that maneuvering to get the gang to release Angelus. Doesn't it want to meet? But the beast master says not everything revolves around Angelus. Sometimes destruction is its own reward. Angelus responds, "Hey, you're preaching to the guy who ate the choir." And I do love Angelus's sense of humor. He muses aloud that it was the beast master yanking the strings all along, and it grabbed Angel's soul. The beast master says it has wonderful plans for its sweet boy. Angelus's view, though, is thanks but no thanks. He has his own plans, and he's not scared of a spooky voice. Connor interrupts Cordelia to bring her another blanket. Her eyes go back to normal. She breathes hard, claiming she's a little woozy, maybe from Angelus nailing her with that crossbow. Or it's the baby, and it's his way of saying... The scene cuts in the middle of her words to Angelus saying, "Hello?" A nice way to link those two scenes thematically. Angelus, though, is trying to get the Beastmaster to answer. He has places to go. A buzzed vampire hearing this one-sided dialogue wants to know what Angelus is on, and could the vamp have some of it? The vampire is feeding on a human woman at the time. Now another subplot or running character season arc begins. Connor strokes Cordelia's hair, and he tells her that Faith is all right. She's a slayer and survived the fight with Angelus and the Beast. Cordelia suggests Angelus killing the Beast means they did the right thing by bringing Angelus back, something Connor has been questioning, and Connor gets a little bit sulky and calls Angelus a real hero. Cordelia tells him Angelus can't fight his true nature, but by killing the Beast, he made the world a little safer for their family. Connor didn't have that the first time around, and she wants that for him now. Really doubling down on the manipulation of Connor, she reminds him that the baby is theirs. No one else needs to know about it. Some of this feels a little slow because it's telling us what we already know and what Connor already knows. But there is some emotional conflict here between the two of them because Connor tells her he's afraid she's ashamed of him and their relationship, and that's why she doesn't want to share the news. Cordelia claims the baby's growing so fast, it'll scare the others at Angel Investigations, and it'll make them want to kill the baby just like they wanted to kill Connor, calling back to the early storyline when Connor appeared on the scene as an adult, or an 18-year-old at any rate. But she says that soon everyone will know what's growing inside her. Downstairs, Gunn gives Fred and Lorne tranquilizer guns. Fred seems a little doubtful about that, but she pulls the gun immediately when Connor appears. So Fred is jumpy and good at drawing her weapon. Connor says, "I thought you were more of a taser girl." I really like this because it's a little bit of humor from Connor. It is a reference to an earlier episode where Fred teased him. I won't go into that in case any of you are planning to go back and watch Angel and have not seen that yet. But it's nice to see a little bit of personality from Connor and to see that he doesn't seem to be holding a grudge against Fred, at least. Fred apologizes for pulling the gun on Connor, and she wants to check on Cordelia, but Connor tells everyone that Cordelia doesn't want to see anyone. Now she's tired. She just wanted some really hot soup. He heads off toward the kitchen. The others find his behavior a little bit odd, wonder if Cordelia and Connor are still involved. Lorne doesn't think so. He doesn't get love vibes. Fred guesses Connor might be upset about Faith benching him and wonders if that was a big mistake. This works in a reminder of last episode where Faith told Connor she didn't want him hunting Angel with her. Lorne and Gunn think it was a good idea to bench Connor because otherwise Angelus might have come back in pieces. But Fred worries that Faith isn't up to fighting Angelus again. The scene cuts to Wesley closing a case of tranquilizing syringes when Faith, now dressed, or maybe they're darts, I'm not sure. She's dressed, she enters and says she's ready to go. Wesley just looks at her in silence and she apologizes about the bathroom wall. He tells her he's not worried about that, though his security deposit is now a loss. But he needs to know Faith is in the game all the way. Faith just grabs the bag, gives him a look, and says, 5 by 5, boss. Very sarcastic. We're a bit past the quarter point through the episode. Usually somewhere around here, the 1/4 twist occurs, the first major plot turn. It typically comes from outside the protagonist, spins the story in a new direction, and sometimes raises the stakes. Here, the plot turn probably is that Faith and Wesley are heading out again to hunt Angelus. That definitely drives the main plot, but it feels more like an inciting incident that sparks the main plot. Up to this point, we've mainly had that fallout from the last episode, and then we had movement in those various subplots. Despite that, the episode itself overall doesn't feel slow to me because there is a lot going on. We've seen movement in the Cordy-Connor subplot, the Angelus Beastmaster subplot, in the character arcs of Fred to some extent and the others as they deal with the fallout of the beast being destroyed, but Angelus getting the better of Faith. The scene cuts to Fred. She talks aloud to herself as she hunts for a guide in the office. Angelus appears behind her. She tells him he can't hurt her. They did a no demon violence sanctuary spell, which happened last episode. But Angelus is way ahead of her. He swings around a glowing amulet, says he guessed they'd do that, and he picked this up so he can now be as demony as he wants. Fred doesn't believe him, but he slams his hand into a pillar next to her and gets up in her face. While she is shaking, Angelus insists on knowing what she figured out about the Beast Master. She refuses to tell him. He grabs all the books and papers spread out on the desk. She tells Angelus he's out of his league, and then notices writing on the amulet and says, "Made in China," and hits Angelus over the head. She manages to shoot a dart at him as well, but she misses. She tries again as he runs out of the office, but the dart hits Lorne instead, who passes out. Angelus leaps to the upper floor. Fred shoots again, but he stops the dart with one of the books he stole. Angelus is looking over the railing at Fred and doesn't see Connor coming up behind him. Angelus taunts Fred when her gun runs out of darts and says he was just starting to have fun. Connor says, "Why stop now?" and lunges for Angelus, but the sanctuary spell stops Connor. It's like an invisible barrier. He hits it hard and falls over the railing to the floor unconscious, and Fred yells his name. There's a cut to a commercial. On return, Angelus jumps down, drops the dart on the floor, and tells Fred, "Nice try," and to think about how close she came to stopping him when he slaughters all her friends. The spell stopping Connor is a great story question for the audience to keep us hanging in there and wondering, because it is only supposed to stop demon violence, not human violence. And until now, the assumption was that Connor, despite having been born from two vampires, Angelus and Darla, was human, superpowered, but human. Faith and Wesley enter the courtyard outside the hotel, and Faith is telling Wesley that they need to find Angelus, and Angelus exits the hotel and finishes her sentence saying, "Get your asses kicked?" Just a wild guess. Faith and Angelus fight. Angelus manages to get Wesley by the neck and hold Wesley in front of him. Faith tells him to let Wesley go. It's between her and Angelus. But Angelus taunts her that it's never just the two of them. Wes will always be in between. He squeezes Wesley's neck harder and dares Faith to come at him, knowing that he can kill Wesley before she kills Angelus, or even hits him. Angelus tells Faith it's all about the choices they make and the consequences, a reference to the titles of 2 Faith episodes in Buffy, Choices and Consequences, which were so key for Faith's development. He tells her, "Don't worry about Wesley. What's one more dead body?" Gunn runs over to join the fight, but Angelus gets away. Connor bursts into Cordelia's room, calling out to her. She comes out of the bathroom, a washcloth to her face, saying she had morning sickness. He tells her Angelus was there again, fills her in that Angelus got everything they had on who the beast is working for, and nearly killed Wesley, but Gunn and Faith chased him off. Connor then asks Cordelia why would Angelus want Lila's book and everything from Lauren's head. This is a reference both to the book that Lila, the evil or formerly evil or sort of evil attorney, obtained that has the only written reference to the beast, and to an episode where Lauren had a vision about the beast, and later the evil law firm Wolfram and Hart managed to pull all that out of his head and put it on paper. So if we didn't know for sure what was strewn across that desk, now we know. Cordelia says she doesn't know, and she's a little surprised the sanctuary spell held up. Connor says it worked, looking disturbed, but he doesn't tell her it worked on him. Lauren is still lying on the couch downstairs, unconscious, and now we get some movement in a running story arc or character arc for Fred and Gunn, who were involved, had a falling out, and then Fred and Wesley kissed, or Wesley kissed Fred and she didn't immediately stop him. Gunn tells Fred it wasn't her fault that Angelus got the book and the Wolfram and Hart papers, but Fred thinks Faith and Wesley would think it's her fault and says Supergirl wouldn't have fallen for a fake hunk of crap, meaning the amulet. But Gunn's just glad it was a fake so Fred wasn't hurt. Fred starts to ask him if they could talk. Wesley grabs a heavy-duty rifle, or maybe it's a semi-automatic rifle. I don't know my weapons that well. Faith asks, aren't they going for capture, not kill, with Angelus? And Wesley says they are, but they might need to slow Angelus down enough to trank him. He tells Gunn to stay at the hotel. He wants someone there who can actually hurt Angelus. He tells Fred to be careful. Next time Angelus shows up, he might have the real thing. Faith and Wesley leave. Faith tells Wesley to stay frosty and adds if he's still in the area. And Wesley says, you'll let him escape again? Faith says this coming from the boy hostage. But Wesley tells her Angelus was right. Faith should have gone for Angelus. Faith counters that Angelus would have killed Wes, and Wesley agrees. But how many more people will Angelus kill now? He argues that Angelus is an animal. The only way to defeat him, quote, is to be just as vicious as he is, end quote. This is a callback to Wesley's view of Faith. He called her an animal in that episode where she tortured him. And he had a lot of doubts in that episode about whether she could ever change. He disagreed with Angel about trying to redeem Faith. And while all of that is not directly said here, calling Angelus an animal, whether as the audience we recall Wesley using that term about Faith, evokes some of that feeling and some of that backstory, which we will see later is still really important to these two characters. The scene cuts to Angelus. After being called an animal, he's now sitting in a really nice leather armchair by a fireplace, going through some documents, specifically the documents with what's in Lauren's head. But he's very frustrated. He can't read the language or the symbols. There are old bookcases all around him, and he starts yelling, and we see there's a man on the floor kind of crawling backwards away from Angelus. Angelus tortures the man, complaining that this is an occult shop. The man's job is to help him, and he demands to know about the Beast Master, but the man doesn't know anything. Thank you again for returning after the break. There have been some fun developments. First, I'm happy to announce that Buffy and the Art of Story is listed as number 8 on FeedSpot's list of the 35 best Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcasts. There are a number of other podcasts on there that I had not heard of yet, so I am super excited to check them out. If you would like to check as well, you can find the list at podcast.feedspot.com/Buffy_the_vampire_slayer_podcasts. During the break, I recorded an early audiobook version of my short story collection, The Tower, formerly known as Sears, and 2 other tales of urban horror. There are a lot of technical things that I have to sort out in terms of how to upload this for sale, but patrons can hear it for free on patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly and look under the bonus collections tab. Finally, I recorded for patrons a bonus episode and released it, Why Not Hush and the Body, about how neither were included in my list of best Buffy episodes or worst Buffy episodes, even though they are critically acclaimed and are fan favorites, and I wanted to explore that. So if you are a patron and would like to hear that, you can do so at the bonus collections tab as well. And I know I said finally before, but there is one more bit of news. The new Buffy and the Art of Story Season 3 Part 2 book is now available in print or in ebook editions, including for Kindle, Kobo, Nook, Apple Books, and on multiple other e-reader platforms. You can find all the Buffy books and links to them at lisalilly.com/Buffy. The voice yells in Angelus's head, tells him if he dares to seek the Beastmaster out again, he'll pay. But Angelus is having none of it. What's the Beastmaster going to do? Give him a migraine? The Beastmaster tries a softer approach, says they should be friends. They're on the same side. But Angelus says he's evil, so the friends thing is out. And if he did have friends, they wouldn't be in his head. Now the Beastmaster taunts Angelus about he normally has to live inside Angel's head with no power, watching what's going on, unable to do anything, and reminds him how awful it is to be buried there under the surface, aware but trapped. The Beastmaster shows Angelus a vision of the jar with Angel's soul and assures him that the real thing is in the Beastmaster's very corporeal hands, and it will be restored if Angelus doesn't behave. Angelus sighs asks what the voice wants, and calls the voice master. This is just past the midpoint of the episode. At almost all stories, the protagonist suffers a major reversal at the midpoint, or makes a major commitment to the quest, or both. There was a major reversal here for Faith because Angelus got away from her and the goal was to trank him to try to bring back Angel. That happened a long way before the midpoint. So if the action plot is the main plot, it feels a bit off in terms of timing, which is part of why this episode, though a lot is going on, sometimes doesn't feel like it's moving that clearly toward a goal, and feels almost like not quite vignettes, but just moving along a bunch of different storylines and subplots. Now, if we see the main plot as Faith's internal conflict, how is she going to fight Angelus without losing herself? Her reversal could be Wesley calling her out on letting Angelus go, and that is right around the midpoint. And ultimately, it's part of why I do see that as either the main plot or key to it, because it underscores the conflict that Faith has over what she's doing and the conflict between her and Wesley that is going to become clear later in the episode. And that hinges on Faith trying to be a better person and their history together, which is one of the things I love about this episode, the way it makes use of all of Faith's story and Wesley's story from Buffy through Angel, because remember, Wesley initially was Faith's watcher. Another reversal relates to the Angelus subplot, which is Angelus has to do what the Beastmaster wants because now he knows the Beastmaster controls his soul. That's also something of a reversal for the Angel Investigations team, because if Angelus kept going after the Beastmaster, maybe he'd be able to defeat the Beastmaster much as he defeated the Beast. And while they certainly don't want Angelus out there, it could help them if the Beastmaster is eliminated. Now there's a personal reversal for Fred, and that is one way to ensure that your subplots or even your more minor movements in character arcs remain compelling in a longer story, which is that they should have their own midpoint reversals or commitments. And you can have them occur around the midpoint of the story, or they can occur later or earlier, but they should be roughly in the middle of the storyline for that character. And here, Fred tells Gunn she only survived because Angelus knew she couldn't hurt him. Quote, all the little mouse could do was squeak at him, end quote. Gunn tells her if she really thinks she did something wrong, don't do it again. It's that simple. And Fred says, is it? Gunn turns away from her and says, sometimes. Fred tells Gunn she knows she should have told Wesley that whatever he feels for her, it was never going to happen. She says she's sorry, but Gunn tells her it's not about that. Fred moves closer and tells him she misses him and asks, can't they go back? Fred and Gunn finally kiss, but when they draw apart, we get that reversal. We can see Gunn pulling away, and he tells Fred he should do a sweep of the hotel, and he grabs a rifle and walks away. The camera pulls back from Fred, and she looks smaller and smaller and more alone. In the demon bar, Faith bangs a demon's head against the bar. It's the demon who spoke to Angelus, but he's not talking. Faith hits him again. Wesley shoots a demon that thought it was sneaking up on them. And the first demon finally tells them about Angelus mumbling to himself at the bar and then going into the back. Faith and Wesley head back there. There are humans lying on couches and in chairs, all very out of it. Vampires are feeding on some of them. The vampires attack. Wesley stakes two of them at once, holding out his arms to the side with stakes just like Angel does in the credit sequences. The scene cuts to Connor. He's making vampire faces at himself in the mirror. Cordelia opens the bathroom door, catching him, and tells him most teenagers check for pimples. He denies he was doing anything, but Cordelia guesses he tried to fight Angelus and the anti-demon spell took him down. He's really upset that it means he might be a demon, but she explains that she's part demon. It's kind of a prerequisite for the Visions gig. Connor tells her it's not the same. She chose that. And really despondent, he says he doesn't even know what he is. Cordelia tells him he's a daddy, and daddies need to take responsibility. He has to face that the two of them are special, and so is their baby. Connor does look a little happy at this. He's happy he's a father. She tells him the only thing he has to worry about is keeping them safe. So all this manipulation of Connor throughout, this is something Cordelia has been doing, but it is so much more heavy-handed here, so much more manipulative that I almost feel sorry for Connor. She tells him now to go find out what's going on. She'll feel a lot better if she knows everything. The scene cuts to Faith. She's trying to get one of those drugged women out of the bar. Wesley explains to her that the woman isn't going to be able to help herself, that humans shoot up this drug and the vampires feed on them using humans like a filter. He says it's supposedly quite intoxicating for both. Faith tries to question the woman. She hits her a couple times. The woman squeals in pain, says Faith is hurting her, and Faith lets her go without getting answers. But Wesley knifes the woman and twists the knife as he questions her. He tells Faith to shut up when she asks what he's doing. He guesses by the tracks on the woman's arms that she's been back there for 4 days. She must have seen the vampire talking to himself. And the woman finally says, yes, it was Angelus. And he talked to himself about a rain of fire and pulling strings and his soul. And she begs Wesley to stop. He finally pulls the knife out. Faith asks Wesley if he's totally lost it. She tries to help the woman. This is a big change for Faith. We can see she is deeply disturbed. Wesley says he avoided the main arteries, and then he notes that now they know whatever controlled the beast made contact with Angelus. He stalks out. Faith follows, asking if torturing humans is what he does now. And Wesley says, oh, you have a problem with a little torture now? I seem to recall a time when you rather enjoyed it. This draws on that history. And this is why Angelus taunted Faith about Wesley always being between them. Angel was Faith's champion. Wesley was angry at him about it, though he eventually made his peace with it. And as always, Angelus knew just how to target the emotional vulnerabilities. It looked like he was aiming at Faith, but now it seems he was really aiming at Wesley, and he hit an exposed nerve. All of this makes Wesley seem more human. Until now, you might think that he's finally come to believe that Faith reformed. After all, she did voluntarily stay in prison all this time. As we saw last episode, she could have broken out anytime she wanted to. So his comments to her about Angel being an animal and whether she was up to the job really could have been solely about, can she do this given that she reformed? But here it bleeds through how much he resents what she did to him. Faith tells him that's not her anymore, the torturing of humans. And he says, still, it's nice to have this. And he holds up that automatic rifle just in case. He tells her he remembers what she did, the shallow cuts, so he'd remain conscious. And he's scornful when she asks if he really thinks she'd hurt him again. He asks, is she going to claim she found God? Wesley tells Faith they both know it's not true. She hasn't changed. She's sick. It goes to the roots, rotting her soul. That's why her friends turned on her. She's a rabid dog who should have been put down. Faith lunges at him, but she only pushes him against a fence, stopping herself from hurting him. But Wesley tells her, see, that wasn't so hard, and almost whispers that it's what she'll need to beat Angelus, and Faith says no. Another great twist in their conflict. Maybe Wesley is doing all of this to be sure Faith can win the fight, rather than because of his resentment, or maybe more likely it's both. And you could see how angry he would be that Faith could torture him for fun or because she personally held a grudge against him, but now she hesitates to do it to save the world. This is the best kind of conflict, both the external conflict between Wesley and Faith's internal conflict, because it arises out of a values difference and of deep-seated emotions and who Faith wants to be and believes or fears she is. The conflict between Faith and Wesley, it cannot be fixed by Faith. She can't undo what she did to him. Saying sorry is meaningless. And this values conflict, Wesley is saying here that the ends justify the means, that torturing humans is justified, that risking Faith returning to her old self, or maybe becoming her true self, is worth it to save the world. Faith has an equally strong value of wanting to stay reformed, to not act like her old self, to not become her old self, or maybe find out that her true self is the one that tortured Wesley. She deeply wants to do the right thing, but what the right thing is has become really complicated. Normally, her reform is the right choice. She has been at peace despite being in prison because she made that commitment to reform, to pay for what she did. And now, what if she does need to engage in that type of behavior? Will it take her down a path she can't return from again? This is true conflict. It's a deep conflict. It is not what I think of as false conflict, which is where the characters are just misunderstanding one another. And if they just sat down and had a conversation, everything would be resolved. This seems like it cannot be fixed. And it's unclear if there are any alternatives that could work for Faith. Why does true conflict matter so much? Because that's what keeps the audience invested. If you're sitting there yelling at these two characters, why do you not just say what you mean? Why do you not just talk to each other? It makes for an unsatisfying story. Now, sometimes the lack of talking can work if there are genuine reasons why these characters aren't communicating, either external forces or internal ones that make it difficult. But if it's just happenstance, or if it's just the writers aren't letting them have the conversation, that's not a very engaging story. In contrast, here, we're really invested in, can this resolve? And it's a story question. Which way will Faith go, and what will happen to her? What will be the consequences? Something Angelus alluded to earlier. Wesley tells Faith she has to be willing to take it all the way. Faith says she can't risk killing Angel after what he's done for her. So another conflict I didn't even mention, which is she is committed to bringing Angel back. He is, as she said last episode, the only one who has believed in her, and she is not giving up on him. She is not going to risk killing him. She says there has to be another way, and Wesley looks extremely doubtful. This all happens around 32 minutes into the episode, so about 3/4 through. This is often where we see the last major plot turn. It should arise out of the midpoint, take the story in a new direction, and raise the stakes. And this does arise from that midpoint reversal where Wesley calls Faith out on letting Angelus go, being unwilling to sacrifice Wesley's life to stop Angelus, questioning whether the reformed Faith can win this fight and do what needs to be done, or whether Faith is really that reformed. And this grows from that, and it creates a really strong emotional shift in the narrative. We're not going to see it necessarily change the action part. She and Wesley are still going to go after Angelus, but it is now clear that this internal struggle for Faith is a fork in the road for her. Will she, as Wesley says, go all the way? Will she embrace her dark side? Or will she stick with being reformed with her new values and risk being unable to stop Angelus and possibly get herself and Wesley killed and put the whole fate of the world at risk? World Gone Wrong is a fictional chat show about friendship at the end of the world. It's hosted by friends Malik and Jamie, set in a wildly fictional world that includes werewolves, vampire students, alien body snatchers, sewer alligators in Chicago, to name just a few creatures that inhabit that world. Living through the apocalypse is hard, but it's easier with friends. You can learn more at audaciousmediacreative.com. The scene cuts to Lorne. He's just waking up. He's still woozy. Fred gives him a sea breeze and apologizes for shooting him, which he is really nice about. And she and Gunn fill him in on what he missed. This type of exposition feels a bit slow because it is telling Lorne what we as the audience already saw happen. This poses a challenge for writers if they really need to have that moment where the new character walks in the door, or in this case, wakes up, because that character does need to know what happened. And one way to make it work better is that that exposition leads to something. And here, one, it does explain to the audience why those papers that were stolen matter so much, because it lays out that that's what came out of Lorne's head. But more important, it leads to a clue to Angelus's whereabouts for the team. Lorne reassures Fred that anyone would have been fooled by that fake amulet. Maury's been peddling these things for years. He has a shop, and he tells them where the shop is. Gunn tells Fred to call Wesley. So you did need Fred to tell Lorne what happened. It does contribute to some parts of the episode feeling a little bit slow, because there are a lot of moments where not quite like this, where it's reiterating what we just saw, but where the characters reiterate things that we knew from last episode. Connor was also there listening to all of this, so presumably he will tell Cordelia, not knowing that she is the Beast Master. The scene cuts to what looks like a warehouse or a half-finished construction site, and yet the occult shop we saw earlier opens onto it. It's on an upper level, so I'm not quite sure what this is. The Buffy fandom wiki said it was a museum. It doesn't look like one to me, but maybe it is. Faith and Wesley walk in together. Wes has that rifle out, and they find Maury's dead body in the occult shop. Angelus appears behind them, and we cut to a commercial, so a great hook to keeping us hanging in there. Angelus tells them a little birdie in his head told them they'd be there. Faith shoots him with a tranq gun, but she misses. Wesley fires the rifle and also misses. Angelus gets the rifle and throws Wes over the railing through all that scaffolding below. Then he shoots at Faith. She rolls down all these stairs, but he didn't hit her with the bullets. He runs down, stands over her, and tells her she has really gone soft. Now we are at the climax of the episode where the opposing forces have their final confrontation and normally resolve the conflict. Angelus asks Faith if she remembers the time she tried to get Angel to kill her because she felt so weepy over being such a bad girl. Very close to another Buffy episode title involving Faith, Bad Girls. He asks Faith if she still wants to die. She yells no. He tells her she's gonna, but not like this, and he empties the bullets from the rifle. Faith kicks him. They fight. He keeps taunting her. Wesley wakes up nearby, but he's out of their view. Angel tells Faith, once he throws her on the floor again, that he's disappointed. She never used to bleed so easily. And then he calls out to Wesley to ask how it's going. Angel says, good old Wes, you can always count on him to tackle a bad situation and make it worse. I mean, hey, look how you turned out. But then again, I guess he didn't have much to work with now. Faith laughs and tells him to save the head trip. She calls him GQ, a reference to Gentleman's Quarterly magazine, a fashion magazine. Wesley told her Angelus would try to get under her skin and told her what she needed. Angelus taunts her about the rousing speech Wesley must have armed her with, and Faith says, yeah, quote, and this, end quote, and throws a weapon at him. I couldn't quite catch what it was, a sword, a disc, but it does hit, and now Faith fights in earnest, having taken him by surprise. It's a really good fight scene. Angelus eventually leaps away from her for a while, but taunts her from afar. He says, there's my girl. I knew she was in there somewhere. All of this doubles down on Faith's internal conflict, which is why I see, or it's another reason I see the main plot being mainly Faith versus Faith. The antagonist here is really herself, her old self, and Wesley stood in for that antagonist, raising all those issues, and now Angelus is echoing them and doubling down on them. Angelus tells her he knows how it feels being buried so deep, trying to deal with the pain. No matter what you do, you're still cut up inside. There's only one way to make the pain stop, to hurt someone else. This draws on so much of the Faith, Angel, Angelus history. Both Angel and Angelus always understood Faith and had a connection with her. Angel understood her struggles, the struggle to try to be good, the struggle with the allure of evil. Faith, when she was on the mayor's side, tried to bring Angelus back, seeing him as a perfect partner for her. It turned out he wasn't, although that wasn't really Angelus. It was Angel play acting. But the fact that Faith saw Angelus that way is echoed here, where Angelus is saying, we are the same. And while they're not exactly the same, and Angel always emphasized that Faith had more of a choice, we did see that in flashbacks, that Angel, even once he got his soul, for a while struggled. So there are a lot of parallels between them, and Angelus is making great use of that. He attacks again, kicks Faith across to another section of scaffolding. She gets the better of him for a while, but he taunts her that it wasn't enough to punish herself in prison. Is she still looking for someone to beat the bad out of her? And says she'll never change. She's a murderer, an animal just like him. She enjoys violence. Faith fights back hard. She tells him he's wrong. She's different. She's not like him. He kicks her legs out from under her and says, you will be. Then he grabs her and bites her, and we go to credits. Once again, there is no falling action, just like last time. Falling action where we usually tie up loose ends, resolve subplots, move season arcs. Not here. These episodes, without Falling Action, and in this one, as I'll talk about in a minute, without resolving the main plot, make me wonder, is this episode part 1 of 2? Is it part 2 of 3 because we have 3 Angel episodes that involve Faith? I am not sure that really works as a structure, but it is interesting and may partly be a result of both Buffy and Angel being much more stories that span seasons and function as installments in the season-long story rather than being self-contained episodes. We've definitely seen that shift in Buffy, but usually, despite being mainly about a season arc, each episode also has a plot that has a beginning, middle, and end, and Falling Action. This episode ended on either a cliffhanger or a game changer. So the difference is a cliffhanger does not resolve the main plot. It leaves the audience hanging and they must come back to the next movie, episode, novel to get the answer to what happened. A game changer occurs when you first resolve that main plot, but then something happens that changes the game or the world going forward. Cliffhangers generally work for audiences if they know they are watching or reading serialized fiction. In other words, they're not expecting a resolution of the main plot within that story. So if an episode is not a standalone, or if a novel is not a standalone, but an installment in a larger story, and that's clear, readers usually feel satisfied. If they go into it thinking that it will stand alone, even if it's part of a larger series, they will feel cheated. They read or watched this whole thing to find out how this main plot resolves, and they don't get resolution. And sometimes the audience will be so frustrated with that or angry that they won't come back. In contrast with the game changer, they get that main plot resolution, so they are satisfied, but the game changer creates a story question that keeps them going on to that next installment because they want to see what happens now that the world has changed. I will say some readers also don't like game changers, so that can be tricky, but it is much more common now in the world of streaming series where viewers expect that, and where there are so many novels that exist within a series that has an installment feel or is billed as being installments. So is it a cliffhanger or game changer here? Faith becoming a vampire, which is what Angel implies. You're going to be like him. He bites her. It looks like she's going to die. That would definitely change the game going forward. The reason I see this as a cliffhanger is because, it's for a couple of reasons. One, we don't know for sure that that's going to happen. Yes, it looks really bad for Faith, but we've seen slayers prevail in fights before where all look to be lost. Wesley is still out there. We don't know for sure that that's what Angel is going to do. And to me, that means the main conflict didn't resolve. We don't know if it's an external conflict, Faith versus Angelus. We don't know for sure Angelus won. On the other hand, because I'm not certain what the main plot is, perhaps it is a game changer here. If the main plot is Faith's internal conflict, we could see this as Faith prevailing. She did not revert to her old self. She essentially risked getting killed, and if we believe that that's what's going to happen, she is being killed rather than becoming her old self. So we could see it as that resolved. Faith did not revert to her old self, and now there's a game changer, all the more ironic because as a vampire, Faith will be worse than her old self. I still see that as a cliffhanger because Faith didn't really win. If she lets herself well, not lets herself, but if her choice to not become her old self leads to her being killed and becoming a vampire, then she didn't win the conflict. So we still don't know if it's resolved. Why does it matter? For the reasons I said before, audience satisfaction. Does it matter in this particular circumstance? Maybe not, because clearly the audience is invested in Faith, in Angelus, in the whole thing. And while when this aired, when you had at least a week between episodes, it would be frustrating to not know the answer, it's also exciting, and I doubt there was any audience member who did not return to see what happened. Now, if this is part 1 of 2 episodes, this is a great midpoint for that 2-story arc. Faith made a major commitment to her values, not becoming her old self, and she suffered a major reversal, assuming that Angelus succeeds. More on that in the foreshadowing section. If you are not going to stick around for foreshadowing, thank you so much for listening. And a special thank you to patrons who support the podcast. I hope you'll all come back in 2 weeks for the Last Angel crossover, Season 4, Episode 15, Orpheus, where Angelus and Faith engage in psychological conflict, and Willow comes to Los Angeles to try to restore Angel's soul. And we are back for foreshadowing, which does include spoilers, both for the next Angel episode and a little bit for Buffy. In the previous Angel episode, Salvage, when Connor wanted to kill Angelus, Fred pointed out that Angel's soul was still out there, though the gang didn't know where it was, so there was a chance to bring Angel back. That foreshadowed that Fred was thinking about this issue, and next episode we'll learn that she called Willow, the one person who ever restored Angel's soul. And Willow will in fact appear in the next episode. So exciting. So that was a nice job foreshadowing that without making clear that Willow would appear on Angel. In the next episode, the audience will learn that in one of the moments when Faith was off screen during this battle between her and Angelus and a little bit Wesley, Faith drugged herself. She had those tranquilizer darts. And this episode did a lot to foreshadow that, which I think was necessary because otherwise, as an audience member, I'd feel a little bit cheated that you did not show me that just to have that cliffhanger. But there are a lot of things that lay the groundwork for it. One of them is that case of tranquilizer darts or syringes that Wesley has in the very beginning. We see him close that case up, and that's what Faith is going to use. The Wesley-Faith conflict, which continues throughout the episode about Faith not being willing to act like her old self. And Faith even says there has to be another way to do this. So she is very clear that she does not want to become her old self and that she won't kill Angelus. So we know how opposed Faith is to killing Angelus or to becoming her old self again. We also learned in this episode, and we saw some hints of it last episode, that humans do drug themselves with this very, very powerful drug, and that the vampires feed on it and both feel the effects. And we saw that the humans and the vampires really seem out of it with this, foreshadowing that this is going to take Angelus down as well as Faith. And in the next episode, both of them will be in this almost like a coma, but where they're hallucinating because of this drug. And both their lives will be at risk. Lauren is going to castigate Wesley for drugging Faith or letting Faith drug herself and risk her life because he tells us a lot of humans, or maybe most humans, do not survive this. And to come back to where I think I started that sentence, they're both going to be in this hallucinatory state, but they are in each other's heads. So the conflict between Angelus and Faith will continue, and their internal conflicts will continue. I really enjoy it. It doesn't sound that fun if you haven't seen it, that, oh, they're in each other's head engaging in this conflict, but we learn a lot about Angel's past and Angelus's past. And it's a chance to see Faith, for much of it, being at peace. She knows she might die, but she also knows she has not become her old self. And I really like that chance to see her that way. The Beastmaster threatening to return Angel's soul foreshadows that the whole next episode will be about Willow trying to return Angel's soul. It reminds us that the soul is out there. It reminds us or tells us that it is possible for the soul to be returned and restored. And Angelus's response that despite being against this voice in his head and ignoring it and taunting it, he agrees to do what the Beastmaster wants because he fears the soul coming back. And that foreshadows how hard Angelus is going to fight in that dream world to resist becoming Angel again or being subsumed into Angel again. And Faith's resistance in this episode foreshadows or sets up her willingness to die if she has to as she goes through that dream world with Angelus. Faith sticking to her commitment to reform, to remain who she is, to do good in the world and make up for some of the evil she did, or if not make up, just take a different path, foreshadows her joining Willow and going to Sunnydale to help fight. And it foreshadows the way she will continue to try to be part of that fight, the way she will accept how angry Buffy is at her. I mean, not that she doesn't push back, she does. But it really is a reformed Faith that we are seeing. And this is part of what makes Faith one of the most consistent characters. She undergoes major change. She chooses major change. Ultimately, some of it is thrust upon her. But each step along the way is so well built and constructed so that by the time she gets to Buffy and is a very different person, we believe it because we have seen it. And I can't wait to get there and to do the next episode. So thank you again for listening to this one. Please come back next time for that last Angel crossover, season 4, episode 15, Orpheus, where Angelus and Faith's drug-induced comas land them in each other's heads, and Willow tries to restore Angel's soul.